The subcommittee will come to order. Well, we got started later than I had anticipated, than we all had anticipated due to votes, but I want to begin by welcoming everyone to today's hearing, Operations in Cyberspace and Building Cyber Capabilities across the Department of Defense. And I'd like to begin, of course, by welcoming our witnesses. Let me start welcoming first General Paul Nakasoni, the Commander of U.S. Cyber Command and the Director of the National Security Agency, and Dr. John Plum, who was recently confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy and who will serve concurrently as the Principal Cyber Advisor to the Secretary of Defense. Welcome to you both. Dr. Plum appeared in front of the Intelligence and Special Operations Subcommittee on Friday, so this is only his second appearance as a witness for the House Armed Services Committee, and the first on matters related to cyber issues. John, I understand that you're a proud Notre Dame alum. I know that Ranking Member Banks is extremely happy to hear this, and I promise not to hold it against you, and look forward to your testimony in just a few minutes. By the way, be appropriate for me right now, Ranking Member Banks is in the middle of a markup on the Ed and Labor Committee, and so therefore I ask unanimous consent for Ranking Member Banks to deliver his opening statement later in the hearing when he arrives, without objection. So, General Nakasoni, it's always great to see you as well. I have valued our relationship over many years now, and I certainly admire your dedication to both your mission and your people. We warmly welcome both of you to today's proceedings and look forward to working together, and look forward to your testimony, of course. As I'm sure you've heard by now, and for the record, I do plan on not seeking re-election at the end of the 117th Congress, and after nearly 22 years in Congress, I'm ready to chart a new course, and I've cherished my time serving the people of Rhode Island's 2nd Congressional District and the men and women in uniform. And over the course of my tenure, I've seen cybersecurity and cyber issues move from the periphery to the center of national security. And I'd like to think and I'd hope that I've played some small role in focusing the Congress on these vital matters. So out of curiosity, I look back at prior year's National Defense Authorization Act. In 2001, my first year in Congress, the NDAA didn't even mention the word cyber or internet, not even once, as a matter of fact. And there certainly wasn't a combatant command dedicated to cyberspace operations at that time. Today, cyber is part of nearly every issue that we deal with in national security. For Congress, not only does the word cyber appear much more than once, but last year was the second consecutive year where the NDAA contains an entire chapter or title devoted to cyberspace-related matters. For the Department, Cyber Command has not only been in existence as a unifying combatant command for nearly 4 years, but is conducting operations day to day, in and out, day in and day out, in defense of our national security. In the 3 years that I've served as chairman of the subcommittee, we have had more than 220 separate pieces of legislation across 3 NDAAs enacted into law. The subcommittee, along with our colleagues from the Senate, have tackled, among many other things, cybersecurity of weapon systems, cyber warfare, personnel pay parity, cyber targeting, support to the private sector and critical infrastructure, capabilities to defeat ransomware, budgetary authorities, cyber requirements for defense contractors, and of the most significance to me, the creation of the National Cyber Director role in the Executive Office of the President. We no longer have to debate whether we will fight wars in cyberspace, and to some, it may seem crazy that we ever had to have that discussion in the first place. Cyberspace is a recognized domain of warfare, and for better or for worse, our service members and civilians are engaged with our adversaries on a daily basis. The Department of Defense and military services have also undergone a similar transformation. We have a dedicated combatant command for cyberspace operations. We have soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, guardians, and Coast Guardsmen defending our nation in cyberspace, and we have witnessed the incredible outcomes for our national defense that we can create through cyber means. And yet, for all the progress that we've made on this front, there can be a sense of deja vu in the issues that we still have to address. On workforce matters, for instance, the points that we can and should make today are unnervingly similar to what was said at hearings 10, 15, and even 20 years ago. Statements such as we struggle in competing with the private sector for talent, or there remains a critical shortfall in our cyber talent. Now, since 2010, this body has legislated on cyber and STEM workforce issues through 55 provisions, and sometimes we seem no closer than we were before. We continue to struggle in elevating considerations for cyber domain to a level commensurate with how we treat our land, air, sea, and now space domains. And I've been in Congress long enough to know that progress with any important issue is always incremental. However, incremental does not have to be synonymous with glacial. So the responsibility of legislators is tremendous, and we yield the tools at our disposal as carefully as possible. When an issue requires attention, we are judicious in how we direct the department to respond. Directive actions are powerful, but resorting to these too frequently lessens their effect. That's why we often direct other actions, such as reports, briefings, quarterly updates, implementation plans, designation of senior officials, and many, many others. We use these to make clear the view of Congress. So we use these tools because they are often successful in accomplishing the desired end state. It is not an exaggeration to say that we have tried to use these alternatives hundreds of times in the cyber context. However, at a certain point, when we are discussing the same issues as our predecessors, we have to ask ourselves, can we continue trying? Trying the same types of approaches that don't result in change? So, if we are repeating the same frustration on an annual basis about cybersecurity in the defense industrial base, or the readiness of our cyber forces, or the way in which the department manages cyber issues, then at some point we must acknowledge a lack of preparedness to address these critical challenges. Congress has great obligation to our national security. During my final year in these halls, I'm not interested in allowing my successor to inherit the same challenges that plague us today. I look forward to being bold, to pushing for overdue changes, and to working collaboratively with our members and our witnesses. So with that, I again want to thank our witnesses for appearing before us today. As a reminder, after this open session, we will move to Rayburn 2212 for a closed member-only session. So as mentioned, we'll have unanimous consent request for Ranking Member Banks. At this time, we'll wait for him to arrive, or we'll have his remarks inserted into the record. So with that, I want to again thank our witnesses for appearing before us today, and with that, as always, it's great to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on this important issues, and I will stop there. And with that, I'd like to turn now to Dr. Plum and General Nakasoni for 5 minutes each to your remarks. Dr. Plum, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thanks, Chairman Langevin. Thanks, Ranking Member Banks and members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to join General Nakasoni, Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, to report on the progress the Department of Defense is making in achieving our objectives in cyberspace. As Secretary Austin has made clear, China is the pacing challenge for the department, and that includes cyberspace. China believes that achieving information dominance in cyberspace will enable it to seize and maintain the strategic initiative in a crisis or conflict. China's malicious ongoing cyber campaigns include exfiltrating sensitive info from U.S. public and private sector institutions and stealing U.S. intellectual property and research from the defense industrial base. Now, while China may be the department's pacing challenge, Russia is the near-term threat today. On March 21st, President Biden warned that Russia could conduct malicious cyber activity against the United States, including as a response to the unprecedented economic costs we've imposed on Russia alongside our allies and partners. The President stated this warning is based on evolving intelligence that the Russian government is exploring options for potential cyber attacks. Now, of course, it's not just Russia and China. Iran and North Korea are threat actors of concern, and ransomware criminals remain a persistent threat. The Department recognizes the need to prioritize missions to disrupt threats overseas at their source, in and through cyberspace. In a domain subject to constant change, our success in this mission demands the ability to conduct timely, offensive cyber operations when the threats meet the threshold for action as established in policy. The existing National Policy Framework, NSPM 13, enables the Department's offensive cyber operations, and it has made important and positive contributions to the Department's ability to engage the threat. The Department will continue to advance and modernize how we operate in cyberspace to engage cyber threats effectively and in a well-coordinated manner. The Department's superiority in cyber domain also depends on maintaining an ability to move quickly in a cohesive manner with key partners. The close collaboration between the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command, which is strengthened by the so-called dual hat arrangement, has been a significant enabler of that success. The DoD is currently conducting its 2022 Cyber Posture Review, which is an assessment of the Department's organizations, plans, programs, and policies germane to cyber operations. Once complete, the Cyber Posture Review will inform the Department's 2022 cyber strategy. That strategy will provide guidance to the Department as to how its cyber combat power should be used to implement the National Defense Strategy, and how, in particular, cyber operations will advance integrated deterrence. The strategy will also identify potential solutions and paths forward for addressing any gaps identified in the posture review. In the past year, we have seen cyber actors conduct malicious cyber activities at an unprecedented scale. Prominent examples include the Russian-led exploitation of the SolarWinds software, the Microsoft Exchange server vulnerability exploited by the Chinese group Hafnium, and the Colonial Pipeline ransomware operation. But the past year has also demonstrated that the Department, the U.S. government, and our private sector partners can find creative ways to mitigate and combat these cyber threats. And today, the U.S. government and the private sector are collaborating in unprecedented ways to prepare for potential Russian cyber attacks against the homeland. DoD will continue to work closely with this committee as we seek to strengthen both our defensive and offensive cyber capabilities and mature our cyber forces. Our ability to successfully operate in cyberspace is essential to U.S. national security. Thank you again for holding this timely hearing. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Plum. General Nakasoni, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Langevin, Ranking Member Banks, and distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to testify besides Assistant Secretary Plum. I'm joined today by Command Sergeant Major Cheryl Lyon, the U.S. Cyber Command and NSA Senior Enlisted Leader. We are honored to represent the military and civilian members of U.S. Cyber Command. Command Sergeant Major Lyon and I want to recognize you, Chairman, for your 22 years of service to our nation. Thank you for your advocacy, your passion, your commitment to not only U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency, but most of all our nation. Defending the nation is at the heart of U.S. Cyber Command's mission. The command has been integral to the nation's response to the current Russia-Ukraine crisis. We have provided intelligence on the growing threat, helped to warn government and industry to tighten security within critical infrastructure sectors, enhanced resilience on the DoD information network, accelerated efforts against criminal cyber enterprises, and together with interagency and allied partners, planned for a range of contingencies. Coordinating with the Ukrainians in an effort to help them harden their networks, U.S. Cyber Command deployed a hunt forward team who sat side by side with our partners to gain critical insights that have increased homeland defense for both the United States and Ukraine. U.S. Cyber Command views 2022 as a year of significant opportunity for building our capabilities as we pursue 5 priorities: readiness, operations in defense of the nation, integrated deterrence, recruitment, retention, and training of the force, and the joint cyber warfighting architecture and enhanced budget control. My goal is a command that remains world-class, ready and capable of providing options and conducting operations in defense of the nation with wider partnerships and exceptional talent. These elements will be essential to national security as our nation faces an array of adversaries who are expanding in scope, scale, and sophistication. Cybersecurity is national security. Speed, agility, and unity of effort brought about by the connected relationship between U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency is the ingredient that protects the United States against our enemies. The men and women of United States Cyber Command are grateful for the support this committee and Congress has given to our command. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Director Nakasoni. I thank witnesses for their testimony. We'll now move to questions. Let me start. This is for both of our witnesses, and just for the record and to clarify. So a media report recently claimed that the interagency is considering changes to the National Security Presidential Memorandum 13, or NSPM 13. So this is an executive branch policy that governs a subset of cyberspace operations conducted by departments and agencies, to include the Department of Defense. So NSPM 13 is as a policy instrument, I believe, has improved the nation's ability to conduct operations in cyberspace. However, it's always important that we do our due diligence regarding oversight. Dr. Plum and Joe Nakasoni, could you each speak to NSPM 13, how it's been employed to date, and if you're anticipating any changes? I'll start with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll take that first and then pass to General Nakasoni. But I guess let me just answer the top piece of this question. Was one, NSPM 13 has been valuable. It clearly has improved the ability to conduct cyber operations, and thank you to this committee and the general's good work, and all those that have got us this far. I also would just say I don't think it's unreasonable or new for a new administration to review existing presidential directives. And so that is kind of a standard piece, and I think that is a reasonable expectation. And it is correct that these conversations are ongoing, and I think our goal, at least my goal, and I know I shared with the general, is to make sure that we preserve our ability to move at speed.
Yeah, I agree with you that a review is appropriate, always for a new administration, but to date, are you expecting any significant changes in NSPM 13 right now?
So I am, I don't want to box anybody in on that. I'm not expecting any changes that would make things anything except better, but maybe we could pass it to the general and he can give you his military insight on that, if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. General?
Chairman, in light of NSPM 13 in 2018, I think it was one of two major advances in terms of authorities and policies that provided us the impetus to take effective action in cyberspace. The other one, as you recall, was declaring cyber as a traditional military activity, which came in the FY19 NDAA. Both of those have been very helpful to us. In terms of changes, obviously that's a policy discussion that's ongoing now. I'm sure those discussions will continue. I know that my discussions with the undersecretaries and also the secretaries, I've made my military knowledge known in terms of what NSPM 13 has meant to us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jerry. This is obviously something we want to continue to follow up, but I, again, having read through the NSPM 13 document when it eventually was forwarded to the Congress for review, that I support its premise and the document as it's written, and hopefully any change we've made would make it better, but hopefully not a sharp deviation from it. General, let me just turn to you. In past appearances in front of the subcommittee, we've discussed the Cyber Mission Force and its size. With the benefit of time, can you speak to U.S. Cybercom's plan for planned growth in the CMF? Additionally, can you speak to the differences you've witnessed, say, from last year to this year, and the work that still continues to evolve and as the force grows and matures.
Chairman, as we originally built the force in the department, 133 teams that were dedicated to our cyber mission force. The previous Secretary of Defense has approved a 14-team growth in the fight-up, so we're going to grow 5 more teams this year. The question I often get asked is this enough? What's the number of teams that you need? And this is a study that's ongoing right now within the department to really determine what is the final number of teams that we need for the future. My sense is we are learning a tremendous amount of our operations right now in support of crisis in the Ukraine that will likely inform this. We're a different force today than we were even 4 years ago when I took over. And so my sense is that while 14 teams is likely the start, I would not be surprised if the department comes to a determination that more are necessary.
Thank you, General. And based on your time in command at Fort Meade, can you speak to the comparison of authorities between Cybercom and SOCOM, and more specifically, are there specific authorities that SOCOM has today which are applicable and would be useful for you in your operation?
Chairman, as you're aware, one of the things we did when we designed U.S. Cyber Command well over a decade ago was to look at Special Operations Command as perhaps an exemplar of where we needed to go. What you speak of is what we term service-like authorities. What are the service-like authorities that we should emulate that U.S. Special Operations Command has today? So right now, the authorities they have with regards to training, the authorities they have with regards to joint force provider and overseeing the provision of teams, and then the last piece is acquisition. All of those, Chairman, are areas that we think we need to be able to emulate more closely to have that service-like appearance for what we do. This is important for us because, as you're well aware, this comes down at the end of the day to the personnel that train, the personnel that are trained on teams, and the effectiveness of these teams. All of those areas are areas that we're focusing on as we move forward.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We go to a second round, or we have the opportunity to go through the classified session for more detailed answers. But with that, I'm going to yield right now to Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you asked some of my questions about the growth in the teams. That's encouraging, General, to hear that there are 14 more slated. Cybercom has shown a great deal of commitment to building both capability and capacity with the Cyber Mission Force, reaching full operational capability ahead of schedule. We see further maturing. I do know in the state of Florida, we've got training units at Corey Station and at Hurlburt Field, both successful operations. How are we learning from these institutions to help develop cyber-related curricula and building sustainable readiness across the force?
So one of the most important ways that we're learning is really twofold, Congressman. One is that our force is learning every single day in the operations that we're conducting in cyberspace. This is a force that's engaged against a variety of adversaries every single day of the year. And so the important piece is how do we take those lessons learned every day and bring them back to a place like Corey Station or Pensacola? And that's one of the things that we certainly have done. But the second piece is, I think, also important. That is, the people that have led our teams, the people that have operated on our teams, the people that have been on hunt forward missions in different countries, how do we get them back into the schoolhouse, that they are the principal trainers of our young people that come forward?
General, the FY23 budget contains $11.2 billion for cyberspace activities, and that's a 7.6% increase year over year, which sounds very strong. And a few months ago, I would have thought that would be the case, but considering we're now at 7.8% inflation, it's actually a net decrease. I realize there's a lag time between when you all are putting budgets together and when they finally get out there, but is your determination that the cyber threat to the country is stagnant or decreasing?
That is not my determination in terms of my view of the future. I think it's increasing in terms of what our adversaries present to us as a nation.
So I know we had a long hearing earlier today about the FY23 budget, but this is a budget that fails to keep pace with inflation. Are you confident that you'll be able to make do? And like good soldiers, you salute and carry out the plan of the day. But is this budget adequate, or would you be asking us to plus that up?
So Congressman, the amount that's been funded to us today is what we need to start with, but we've also identified unfunded priorities, and we'll provide that to the committee as directed by the NDAA.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Plum, what is your assessment of our ability to deter cyberspace attacks on the U.S. government and critical infrastructure in general?
Thanks, Congressman. Defending the homeland and deterring cyber attacks of at least I guess I would say a strategic nature, absolutely essential. I think, I guess what I would offer is I don't think cyber deterrence is a piece unto itself. So I think deterrence comes, we've been using this term integrated deterrence. I'm sure you're well aware of it. I know everyone here is. But you don't deter cyber just with cyber alone. You deter with all instruments of national power. And I think at the moment the president has used the megaphone of the United States of America to warn the Russians not to attack critical infrastructure. And at the same time, through Cyber Command and through our Department of Homeland Security partners, we've been working with private sector and the Defense Industrial Board to make sure that people's shields are up, that they're ready, that they're being alerted to threats. So I think part of that is the defense piece. Part of that is a warning of retaliation, and I actually think that is at the moment holding.
Okay. Are there additional tools or resources or authorities that would be helpful to help bolster our ability to deter these cyberspace attacks against the country?
I think on the specific question of tools, I would ask the general to answer that. I don't know if that's answerable in this session. I don't have any. I believe the authorities are in place. I believe the authorities are in place at this time.
General and class, would that anything you would want to offer in this setting?
So I have the authorities that I need right now, Congressman, to accomplish my mission. Obviously, we look at a series of partnerships, and no one department or agency can do it all in cyberspace. So what we are very focused on is how do we develop the partnerships with CISA and with FBI and with foreign partners, and most importantly, the private sector, to ensure that we all have a common vision and a common vigilance.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. Mr. Bolton is now recognized.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here, for your ongoing work. This morning, Chairman Milley listed 4 primary elements of national power, one of which is informational, and it sounds quite important in that context, and yet information operations is buried in the organizational structure of DoD, and many experts feel that our capabilities have been significantly degraded over the past decade. This as we watch the value of information warfare play out on the ground in Ukraine. Do you believe that information operations is a warfighting function that fundamentally should be in Cyber Command, or should it be elsewhere in DoD? General Nakasoni, make you take a crack at that first, please.
So Congressman, it already is in Cyber Command. I think what I would say is that what have we learned about information? Information always has to be paired with our cyber operations to make them even more effective. Information is only as effective as it is accurate, timely, and relevant, and that ability for us to do that needs to pair with the type of work we're doing, either defensively or offensively. We have come a long way since 2018 in working the information operations, but we still have a long ways to go.
Thank you, General. I mean, my frustration is that, to me, cyber is one of many, many delivery methods for information. And it doesn't make sense to me that it's buried in a command that's just one of the delivery methods rather than at a more strategic level. But I understand the fact that you own it and you're going to defend it. Mr. Plum, what's your view on this? Do we have the right organizational structure for information operations, or should we be looking at reorganizing within DoD?
So, Congressman, thanks for the question, and obviously information warfare, if you wish, has been really essential really over the last month or two here with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I guess I would say on one level, we are conducting information operations at a strategic level with the President and the White House making announcements.
I understand that, Mr. Plum, but I'm asking about the organizational structure within DoD.
So in the organizational structure, I'm going to ask you if I can take that for a lookup. I'll say I don't have anything immediate, but I don't want to leave something undone.
That's fine. If you can take that for the record, that would be great.
Right,
General, you mentioned to me earlier that the USMC, the Marine Corps, has done a great job of retaining its cyber workforce. and the Marines are planning further changes and reforms to their personnel policies, including directly commissioning cyber operators and other specialties into higher ranks, as was commonly done with various specialties during World War II. Do you believe these additional changes are warranted and will help further retain the workforce?
I do, and I see it already. I've seen it in my own service in terms of, first of all, building a branch, then taking a look at different initiatives in terms of what they do. What the Marines have really done very efficiently that I applaud is the fact that they've lengthened their tours in terms of how long they stay with us. Most young men and women that come into the Marine Corps that want to be cyber warriors want to do cyber, and so being able to do that for 6+ years at one location has been very, very attractive to them, and we see that in the payoff with regards to the retention numbers.
General, you described the mission of Cybercom in your opening statement as defense of the nation. What role do you see for offense and deterrence? I know we talk about integrated deterrence, but when we really talk about having an effective deterrent, it means having an effective offense. So how do you characterize the role of offense to the American people?
So, Congressman, when I speak of defense of the nation, that is a full spectrum defense to include offensive operations. You know, the best defense a lot of times is a good offense. The way that we have done this at U.S. Cyber Command is the idea of persistent engagement. How do we maintain both the ability to share information and act against our adversaries? We don't want those adversaries to continue to have free reign in terms of what they do in cyberspace. So how do we ensure that when they steal our intellectual property or when they steal our identities or when they try to interfere within our elections, we take them on? And that's what we've done since 2018.
But if I can press you a bit on this, I mean, it's common knowledge, without going into anything classified, that the Chinese are stealing our intellectual property every single day. They're sometimes effective at getting it from DoD, but they're effective all the time at getting it from the private sector. Do you think we should have a more aggressive deterrence with China?
So I think in terms of the way that we look at our adversaries such as China, is this needs to be not only persistent engagement, but how do we look at the authorities in terms of what's being done in the United States and what is available for the Chinese to operate so freely within our nation. So I think that has to be a greater perspective on how we're going to do this in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for being here. General Nakasoni, it's good to see you again. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about these growing and ever important issues. Thinking about our adversaries, one thing that's very concerning is that the cybersecurity of the commercial and government entities of many of our adversaries, they're in lockstep. Right? They're operating, I would almost say, not even necessarily in a commercial way. That may be even just a front, right? Like they're really operating in lockstep, where you contrast that with American cyber mentality, kind of an every man for himself. It's a way to categorize it. I know there's nuance to that, but I'm concerned that we're setting ourselves up to lose that competitive edge. So without stronger U.S. cyber's public-private partnerships with regulatory and acquisition authority, America's technological may become an exploitable vulnerability. A question. I'm interested in this. I'm interested in improving our cutting-edge innovation efficiently, and then transitioning those programs of record. Few things disincentivize innovation more than technologies and products languishing in the proverbial sort of, let's say, valley of death in the acquisition process. I believe we can accelerate the adoption of emerging technology and strengthen our defense innovation base by empowering unit commanders who are responsible for mission outcomes impacted by rapidly changing technologies such as AI, SaaS, quantum computing. Would you support an innovation fund available at the installation or the installation command level to provide the experts on the ground the flexibility to pursue, develop, and integrate new emerging technologies? Yeah.
So, Congressman, I would offer that we have some of that today, and I think working with DIU, Defense and Innovation Unit, being able to work at a facility like we have at U.S. Cybercom called Dreamport, where private companies are able to understand what our needs are and then rapidly adopt it. It isn't necessarily a means of not having enough money. It's the fact that what we are doing is trying to cut down the barriers to make sure that the private sector understands our needs and rapidly they're being able to meet those needs. We've had some success there. We need more. And I think that's, more empowered by this idea of being able to have a number of different touch points, such as the Defense Innovation Unit and Dreamport available to our folks readily.
So DIUs, we've interacted with them from our team, have had very positive interactions, and I really appreciate the shift that we're really trying to make here, taking commercial products, taking what's commercially available, making it very relevant and useful in our DoD. And so it's a good, please.
So if I might follow up on it, so meet very frequently with Mike Brown, who's the leader of DIU. What has been most effective for us is for them to understand these are the challenges that we would like to have you go and see what the private sector may have. And so they've done that readily, and I think we're starting to see some of the benefits of that.
With it not being as much, as you say, a funding issue, more of a regulatory and, that kind of conversation, we're welcome to that. I think that you would get a lot of support from this committee on helping navigate that. Also, General, my bipartisan bill, the Better Cybercrimes Metric Act, passed the House last week. It will improve the way federal government tracks, measures, and analyzes cybercrime. However, I'm concerned we still do not have enough to incentivize private businesses and industry to share with the government when cyber attacks occur. While you and I know, we know this not to be true, many business owners have been told that they have low confidence the government will do anything if hacks are reported. Do you have any recommendations on how to increase the willingness of private companies to share information when these attacks do take place?
Congressman, if I might take that for the record, just because I'd like to think about that a bit more. I know it's a very difficult question, and I want to make sure I give a fulsome answer.
Okay, excellent. That's I've interacted with our Utah network quite a bit. We have a really awesome group of cyber professionals, startups. It's going on. It's being taught at our universities. It's a burgeoning area, and we're really excited about it. And they're really engaged, and they want to help. They want to be involved in the work that they're doing for the mission and for the pride of their country. So I appreciate any response that you have with that. We've historically led the world in developing cybersecurity initiatives and standards, and as I've talked to those experts, they're waiting to implement new forms of security approved or recommended by key government entities to assure that businesses are not using technologies that may not receive future approval for government use. This has undoubtedly slowed the adoption of new cybersecurity technologies. What is Cybercom doing to help inform and assist private partners with legacy security systems strained by the rapid proliferation of new computing form factors?
So, Congressman, our focus has been on the defense industrial base. That's where the Secretary of Defense is a sector risk management authority. And so we've worked closely with both the National Security Agency and our private DIB partners to make sure that they have both an understanding of the threat and understanding of ways that they can rapidly get after that threat.
Okay, thank you. My time's up.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Ms. Escobar is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chairman, for holding this hearing. It's a great opportunity for the committee to examine the functions of Cybercom and inform the American public of the critical role it plays in our nation's cyber strategy. As more and more of our daily lives move onto the web, it's essential that our country have top-of-the-line cyber security defenses. This is especially critical for me because I represent El Paso, Texas, a border region with over 800,000 people that is also home to one of the largest installations in the Department of Defense, Fort Bliss. General Nakasoni and Secretary Plum, I'm going to ask both of you the same question. One of the recurring topics on border security over the last few years has been technology. I'm a firm believer that appropriate technology can and should be used to perform certain security functions, and that deploying more strategic technology at our land ports, in particular, our land ports of entry, can decrease wait times for both cars and pedestrians, moving trade and commuters more quickly and more securely. However, the use of this technology does raise certain questions, including how well fortified it is against potential adversarial cyber attacks. General and Secretary Plum, you mentioned working in an interagency manner with the Department of Homeland Security. Is there any interagency collaboration between Cybercom, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Homeland Security on the cybersecurity being provided for the ever-expanding technology being used at our borders?
Congressman, thank you very much for your question and your emphasis on cybersecurity. While U.S. Cyber Command does not have that relationship, the National Security Agency, of which I head, does have that relationship with the Department of Homeland Security to provide that type of support with regards to cybersecurity. That's something we do regularly with the Border Patrol based upon the request of the Department of Homeland Security. And so this is something that is an ongoing mission for us at NSA, and it's something that, that DHS and NSA regularly talk about.
Great. And actually, Secretary Plum, thank you so much, General. Does the department view the expansion of technology at our borders as another avenue that a foreign adversary may seek to exploit if the proper cybersecurity precautions are not taken?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I would say every technology has an avenue for exploitation that an adversary could use.
Thank you. General, we had a discussion last year about Cybercom's efforts to recruit a diverse workforce. As I mentioned then, I represent the University of Texas at El Paso, which is a Hispanic serving institution with a strong track record with the NSA as a national center of academic excellence in cyber operations. In your written testimony, you mentioned Cybercom's academic engagement network. I'd like to give you an opportunity to expand on the work you've been doing with that initiative and others to not just engage with academia, but to recruit talent that comes from every corner of the country, including traditionally underrepresented populations.
Congresswoman, I welcome your invitation to do that. As you well know, we stood up the Academic Engagement Network at U.S. Cyber Command just this year. And part of that is to be able to recruit a much broader demographic of our nation. We need a force that's reflective of our nation, and this is one of the ways that we're doing it. I must, in all transparency, tell you that our focus has been in San Antonio of late, and so maybe we need to go a little bit further to the west in Texas to take a look at what El Paso has to offer there. But if you don't mind, let me take that up in the coming year.
I would invite you to do that, and in fact, would be happy to host you for a visit at the University of Texas at El Paso in El Paso, and then would love to follow up with you at some point in the near future about any lessons that you've learned since the start of the Academic Engagement Network, anything that you'd like to share with us so that we can continue to build on the work that you've begun. Mr. Chairman, my time is just about expired. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. Mr. Fallon is now recognized for 5 minutes. Do we have Mr. Fallon?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. You're recognized for 5 minutes, Mr.
I
Fallon.
was promoting you there. Thank you. Listen, I think one of the mistakes that the public makes when it comes to cyber defense policy is the idea that this is somehow a new realm. However, you know, the threats in cyberspace aren't new, and we've long since possessed both offensive and defensive capabilities in competition in cyberspace, of course, is almost constant. Even though this problem has been an issue for a long time, I have a substantial concern that the Department of Defense is still not properly positioned to address it in today's rapidly evolving landscape. My concern is that there are maybe too many chefs in the kitchen, if you will. I understand Cybercom is a joint force comprised of service cyber components from each of the branches. Then on top of that, you have Cyber National Mission Force and Joint Force Headquarters and DoD Information Network. I mean, already that becomes 7 separate commands. Mix in Cybercom's commander's dual role as director of the NSA and chief of Central Security Service, and you get another layer. Finally, throw in the rest of the intelligence community, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, et cetera. And I think you see where I'm going with this. So what do you get? A whole lot of bureaucracy and finger pointing, and not a highly adaptable organization ready and willing to fight and win. Everybody wants to be in charge, and everybody wants to, you know, maybe get the credit or pass on the blame if that's the case. Dr. Plum, can you honestly say that our cyber mission force is not hampered by this bureaucracy? And if you think there is a bureaucracy issue, what can we do to streamline it?
Thank you, Congressman. I agree with you that we need to make sure that bureaucracy doesn't get in the way of delivering military effects where needed. I actually think that we are in pretty good shape at the moment. There's always room for improvement, and always have to be, anyone that works in the Pentagon or really the government knows that you always have to be careful to guard your ability to not have more bureaucratic growth slow you. I think the trend line, though, for cyber effects in particular is going in the right direction. As we said at the beginning, sir, NSPM 13 has provided improvements in the ability to use cyber to advance the national interest. And my goal in this role is to make sure that trend line continues in the positive direction.
And do you think there's some what things specifically, you don't need to say right now or if you want to get back to us, but how can we maximize efficiency? I just want us to be thinking along those lines. General, just for time's sake, General Nakasoni, we've heard some complaints from within Cybercom that one day they work for one person and their priorities, and the next day it changes. How do we create a unified vision and mission to avoid subordinate commanders working on, pet projects and silos, if you will?
So, Congressman, I'm not aware of that. I would tell you that there's one person in charge of U.S. Cyber Command. That person is me. And I have not seen that in terms of being able to develop options or being able to respond to crises for the nation. One of the opportunities that we have here is the fact that we have a very flat organization. While we may have a number of different headquarters, the teams all fall under the operational control of the commander. And so while we have different missions that we support different commanders, there is no problem in terms of being able to develop the options and the requirements, and I would tell you the effects for what our nation needs.
General, we recently created a new service in the Space Force. Cyberspace is a realm, of course, that touches everyone, everywhere. Do you believe there's any merit to creating another service designed to support all others, like absent of territorial commands from subordinate commanders that can focus solely on cyberspace across DoD?
Congressman, I don't see this right now. One of the areas that I think has been very effective, as the chairman had indicated, we have service-like authorities to train the force, to be able to provision the force, to be able to do acquisition. I would be very concerned on a new service in terms of what you would call the bureaucracy that would be set up there. We're looking for our services that do a very, very good job of recruiting and training, and then for us to be able to employ them rapidly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. And now Mr. Ross is now recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that, and thanks for coming this afternoon. General Nakasoni, this is somewhat related to the question you just asked, but I'm asking in a different way to maybe sort of dig into a little bit about the construct of the Cybercom integrated planning elements and the joint cyber centers. If that's the most optimized mechanism for coordination between Cybercom and other COCOMs.
So I've seen it both ways, Congressman, and I've lived long enough now to see both the joint cyber centers and now what we developed over the previous years, the integrated planning elements. Let me tell you why I think the integrated planning elements are really what has been very effective for us. We've taken and designed an integrated element that goes to each of the combatant commands, the other 10 combatant commands, and it varies in size from 39 to 50 folks. What that provides the commander are people that really understand cyberspace, that understand how we do our operations, how we do our planning, how we do our execution. They're resident today with General Walters at U.S. European Command. In fact, they are resident today to really understand and be able to provide General Walters' staff the options that are necessary, both defensively and offensively, that are effective. Why do I think this has been effective is because the feedback that I'm getting from the commanders is that they really value this type of integration.
So when they are with COCOM, does COCOM then have an operational command of those folks? Are they setting the missions, whereas you've done the training and equip part of the mission? Is that how to think about this?
They go embed themselves within different parts of the staff within the COCOM. That's designed by the combatant commander.
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe take a look at that, but on a little bit more on that point, though. Thanks for bringing up UCOM. And again, I apologize, I was out, but there was an article in last month, cyber troops stretched thin in Ukraine, and I don't know how you can, if you can answer this or not, but how you see U.S. capabilities currently coordinating or integrating with allies and partners in any current operations that are based in EUCOM.
So we can talk about this in more detail in the closed session, but what I would offer here is that one of the very big lessons that we've learned is the ability to deploy a number of different teams early on in a crisis to U.S. European Command. And then working with General Walters and his staff, making sure that those experts, those teams, go to the places that are necessary. And I can provide a little bit of thought in terms of where those teams have gone when we meet a little later on today.
Are there broader lessons to learn about what would trigger the decision to send those teams? It seemed somewhat obvious in the current case, let's say, but there may be other cases in the future where it may not be as obvious that it's time to send teams. So what are you learning about looking into the future?
So what we've learned over 9 different hunt forward operations in 2021 is the fact that consistent engagement with a series of partner nations is really valuable. We understand the networks, we understand the leadership, we understand what they care about most. And so working with that, in competition or crisis is much better than, waiting until there's a conflict.
Right.
And so that's what we've learned.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, did folks ask questions about education requirements or anything else? So yeah, so how are we doing with the pipeline of people that Cybercom can utilize in the future?
Broadly, I would say, Congressman, our supply is not large enough in our nation. And so, as you well know, within the state of Washington, with a number of different centers of academic excellence, we follow this up now at U.S. Cyber Command with the Academic Engagement Network to be able to build a resource for our nation. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll come in as military or civilian members of the Department of Defense, but the ability for them to have exposure and interest in what I think is obviously a key competitive advantage for our nation in the future.
All right, that's fine. Thank you, and yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Mr. Johnson is next recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General, for your time today. In your role, you are responsible for the cyber operations that protect the sprawling .mil digital enterprise that our warfighter really depends upon. And over the last several years, progress has been made to implement an Internet Operations Management program that looks at DoD cyber infrastructure through the eyes of the adversary. But despite some progress, this program has yet to be deployed across the entire DoD information network. And recently enacted FY22 DoD appropriations provide funds to do that. So are you committed to pushing this critical endeavor across the finish line this year? Should we expect that?
I am committed, Congressman, and I would say, first of all, thank you for discussion on the DoD Information Network, a sprawling network in terms of what provides us support for our warfighting functions, our communications, and our capabilities. What we have done with our Joint Force Headquarters that's in charge of the DoD Information Network is look at all 45 stakeholders within this information network and then make sure that we're checking in terms of how they're conducting their operations. This is part of the, the foundational work that we need to have a much more secure and resilient DoD.
Very good. And could you describe how Cybercom is integrating artificial intelligence and machine learning to automate defense of the DoD and monitor it and identify cyber threats?
Congressman, we've worked a number of different experiments. I know specifically an experiment that we worked at Army Cyber to look at artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify vulnerabilities within our network and then patch them automatically. This is a really good example of taking, what we would consider, a vulnerability and not having to have a human in the loop, but rapidly being able to address the vulnerability with a patch before anyone knows it. This is the initial work that we've done. There's more work that needs to be done in AI. I'm a very, very strong supporter of the AI National Commission and where we can bring that to U.S. Cyber Command.
And I know that some of this is sensitive and maybe better in a classified setting, but I'm just wondering about what the most promising applications of AI and ML may be for the Cybercom enterprise.
There are many, Congressman, and I think that I will defer that to a different venue to perhaps have that discussion with you.
Very good. Let me ask you about something else. I've got a couple minutes here. The late scholar Thomas Schelling described bargaining power as the power to hurt. Could you describe the utility of the defense forward concept compared to a more traditional deterrence by the punishment model?
So as Secretary Plum indicated, cyber deterrence is not nuclear deterrence. And this is a much different means upon which we look at this domain. And so what we have learned, I think, over the past several years is that we have to have an ability to really drive the cost up for our adversaries. And there are a number of different ways that we can drive the cost up for our adversaries. One is we can have much more resilient networks. Two, we can share information more broadly. Three, we can take on cyber adversaries that are attempting to attack our nation. Those are all ways of doing it, but it's a comprehensive approach. And the other piece that I would add is what we've learned from elections is that partners matter. And partners like the FBI, partners like CISA, partners like academic institutions that have knowledge that they're tracking on adversaries that we may not even see. And so I think, again, to the point of there's no one agency, one department that can do it all in cyberspace, but the most effective ones are the ones that partner and get it done together.
Very good. Thank you again, General. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Bice is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Nakasoni, it's good to see you again. The emergence of new technologies like artificial intelligence and quantum computing and the proliferation of cyber intrusion capabilities pose significant threats to our national security and to our service members. One of my key concerns impacting the nation's cyber posture is the workforce challenges that we face. As you are both well aware, it is critical that we get more trained cyber professionals into the door at U.S. Cyber Command. With the tremendous competition in the private sector for cyber talent, this is a huge challenge. General Nakasoni, can you briefly describe the U.S. Cyber Command's efforts to recruit and retain top talent in the face of stiff competition from the private sector?
Congresswoman, thank you very much, and it's good to see you again as well. Let me begin, first of all, with the recruit piece. This is an area that I think our services who have the responsibility, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, to recruit talent have done exceptionally well. We continue to recruit a population of young men and women that want to serve our nation. And they want to work in cyberspace, which is incredibly attractive to them. The challenge is not necessarily the recruiting. The challenge isn't the training. The challenge, as you've indicated, is the retention. And that's both for military and civilian. Let me give you two ideas in terms of, or several ideas that we've approached it. One is certainly targeted supplements to very, very high-end capabilities. So this is targeted local supplements based upon people that are coders or people that have significant technical abilities that pay them at 28% more than the going rate. Now, that's never going to perhaps compete with the private sector, but what it does do, it does give us a leg up in being able to say what you do is valued and what you do is obviously enumerated. The other piece that I would say is a certain amount of dynamic of how we approach cyberspace. And one of the things as the Congressman mentioned, being able to do recruiting that is, from, a population of civilians is, hey, come in and be a mid-grade officer. Or as we take a look at our enlisted workforce and say, hey, why don't you go and spend 6 months in training with industry or going to get a graduate degree. These are all areas that perhaps we haven't traditionally done within our services, but this is the dynamic nature that I think we've got to approach the problem here in cyberspace. So as I've talked to the service chiefs, one of the areas that I've mentioned is this is a shared responsibility. Shared in terms of what you have to do as leading your service, but also shared in the idea of we have a lot of different areas that we need to be able to make sure that we keep our best people.
I love your thinking outside of the box approach to this, the problem, because I think we have to figure out how do we keep and retain this crucial talent. One other thought here is, how are you competing with DHS when it comes to pay for these individuals? It's my understanding that the CISA folks are paying significantly or can pay significantly more than you're able to do. Is that something that Congress needs to look into?
So we're working with the department right now in terms of how we have to look at that. That's not only as my role as Commander U.S. Cyber Command, it's also my role as Director of NSA, because we do see increased competition. But again, I think this is something that we'll work closely with the department, working obviously through Secretary Plum as well as the principal cyber advisor to bring these ideas. This is something that we're very well aware of.
Great. And when we're talking about cyber leverage, how does Cybercom leverage commercial threat at information providers, and how does Cybercom share information currently? I've heard some concerns about not sharing information. You mentioned the FBI previously in a comment that you made. I think we have siloed a lot of information, and there's not as much sharing as there could be. Can you talk a little bit about that?
There's a program called Under Advisement that is a commercial program that we execute at U.S. Cyber Command. It's run by 12 people of my command that reaches out to a number of commercial providers and talks about what we're seeing in cyberspace and what are you seeing. It's a two-way street, right? I mean, so we're very interested in obviously what they're seeing, but they're also interested to know what are you seeing about our threats. This is a incredibly powerful program that has been able to allow us insights into ransomware and insights into adversaries that are seeking vulnerabilities within our networks. But it's all based upon this idea of give and take with the private sector. And so this is a program that I would commend in terms of really great success that we're seeing.
I would love to see more of that, because I think that information share is going to be crucial for us to be able to prevent a significant national security cyber threat that we face every day. But that sharing of information for the private sector is crucial.
If I might follow up, one other piece that I do want to highlight is that I did mention the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and our Cyber National Mission Force, it's commanded by Major General Hartman, our elite force that has done tremendous work in defense against malicious cyber actors in both elections and ransomware, is closely partnered with a number of different field offices throughout the United States to share this information. As you're well aware, the FBI obviously has a track on these cyber criminals within the United States. So this pairing of information is one of the areas that Director Ray and I talk about a lot as being a significant success story in 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Bice. We're going to be wrapping up in just a minute to go into the closed session upstairs. But before we do that, General Nakasoni, if I could, earlier today in your appearance in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee, you spoke to Readiness Matters. And in those remarks, you noted there are defined roles for Cyber Command and the military services, and that the services generally are able to present forces that have passed through a basic level of training. From there, it's the command's responsibility to manage the advanced training. I know that in discussions that you and I have had, that obviously training is important. Having the the right skill level, especially as you're operating, our operators operating in cyberspace. If we've got concerns around the readiness of our force and the commitment of the services to the cyber domain writ large, should we be pressing the services to re-examine and consider raising the bar on what that basic level of training consists of and is defined as, or do you recommend a better way of doing this? Should we be taking a fresh look at that?
Chairman, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head here. This is what we're doing right now, which is the Secretary of Defense has signed out a memorandum directing that one service, the Army, has the responsibility for advanced cyber training. And so now we're going to build that with the Army being in charge to be able to ensure that we have standards at different locations for this training. My hope is that by the time an operator comes to me, there's very little training that they have to do. That's not the case today for a number of different reasons. And so, again, this is part of our maturity, our readiness, but I do see progress as we move forward.
I hope you'll have advice for us and thoughts on how we kind of make that the training kind of uniform level of readiness among all the services. So, when they get to you, they're at peak level, then you can take them obviously even further. So.
And part of this, Chairman, is cyberspace is one of the few domains that is just now getting a simulation capability. For us, it's called a persistent cyber training environment, It's where we're able to do missions in a simulated way. And you can imagine the power of this being able to do with training repetition and repetition and more reps, being able to do that. So we're deploying that now throughout our service elements to be able to do that. That's a key enabler that we need to be able to do in 22.
Excellent, excellent. And I know that, we've talked about the amount of time they're assigned to U.S. Cyber Command in a cyber role. And before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to talk about, publicly in terms of how long you'd like to keep them, doing cyber work as opposed to the current construct? Anything you want to add?
Forever.
Well,
Chairman, I would say that I'm working this very closely with the service chiefs now. In fact, I'm in communication with them to look at this. This is something that Command Sergeant Major Lyon is also working with the senior enlisted leaders. We have to standardize tour lengths. We need to standardize active duty service obligations. We need to take a look at a means upon which we have, I think, more uniformity with regards to how long young men and women are going to be with our force.
Yeah, agreed. That's something that both I and the committee is going to continue to follow, but look forward to working with you on that going forward as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask unanimous consent that Ranking Member Banks' opening statement be entered into the record. He's still in his markup, and so without objection, so ordered. With that, I want to thank members for their questions. I want to thank our witnesses for their testimony today and their answers to the questions. Members may have additional questions that they need to get answered that will be submitted for the record. We ask that you respond to those members in writing as expeditiously as possible. We will now adjourn and move to the closed session upstairs. With that, the subcommittee stands adjourned.